There was some industry in Cheltenham, but it wasn't a real centre of industry. It was quite an affluent area. There were quite a lot of military families. Places like Cheltenham College trained a lot of people that went on to sort of military careers. There was a lot of middle class people. It did have another side to it as well, as it does, but it was definitely quite an affluent area. Cheltenham was no exception to this. It did develop a lot during the First World War, in particularly the aviation industry. Martin's was a very well-known local company. They employed a lot of skilled craftsmen, carpenters and so on, and during the war they used these skills to develop the Gloucester Aircraft Company. A.H. Martin subbed the money to John Chandler, who was this, skilled and creative and inventive employee of the company, to found a company to develop and use his metalwork skills. He was quite involved with the YMCA. He was the secretary for about 5 years, I think, in the kind of early 1900s, just before the First World War. He was quite involved with St John's Church. I think he ran their billiards club, various social groups, the Conservative Club. He was quite well known locally, I would imagine, because he was also quite a prolific writer of letters to the local newspaper, a number of them appearing in the Gloucestershire Echo in the editor's notes columns, expressing opinions on various different topics. In particular, he wrote one after a successful Zeppelin raid in 1916, complaining that the Home Office hadn't taken him up on the design he'd come up with for some anti-aircraft weaponry that he'd designed.
This is the short magazine Lee Enfield rifle. You have a front sight with a blade here. You line those up with your target and squeeze the trigger. Obviously, in order to do that, your head would be here and will be well exposed. So this is the problem, and this is where the Chandler device was used in order to try and avoid that situation. So the first thing to do is to load the rifle. This is a pre-charged magazine, and this can be readily inserted from below without exposing the firer. To operate the bolt in order to put a cartridge into the breech. Being a bolt, it locks, so you need to unlock the bolt handle and then pull the bolt back and then reverse the system and lock it again. And this is where these two levers come into play. This one clearly unlocks the bolt handle, and then this one pulls the bolt all the way back. When you press this down, it drives a cartridge into the chamber, and then we lock the bolt again, so we now have a cartridge in the chamber and the bolt is cocked. So you would normally fire it with the finger on the trigger, but again, because the operator is down here and is looking at the target through the sights reflected in here and in here, so the firer is down here looking in there, then we have an extended cable which runs up through onto the trigger, and we can then fire that so.
As far as I understand, one of the key battles where periscopes were put to good effect was in the Gallipoli campaign.
If you can imagine the White Cliffs of Dover and your enemy are up on the cliff firing down at you behind sandbag emplacements, and you're down on the beach, you are observed no matter what you do. The first time where an attacking force was so disadvantaged by the geography of the area, because the defending force automatically had an advantaged position above, so they could enfilade their attackers much more easily than almost any other war had been.
A lot of it was fought on sort of mountainsides and coves and quite steep drops, but I understand it was quite a valley kind of environment, so there were quite a lot of dugouts where they could kind of hunker down, and then the periscopes could be used to take cover whilst being able to still fire.
Everything can be done from below the rifle. The standard way in which in a battle the troops used to reload was to take a clip of cartridges, put it on the top of the rifle and push it down with the thumb. But of course, if you did that in a trench, you could be exposing yourself over the parapet. So this is one of the advantages.
Which would allow the soldiers to see over the trench without having to put their head above the trench line and risk sniper bullets. After the First World War in 1919, John bought out A.H. Martin's shares in the company and took ownership of the Gloucestershire Surgical Appliances. He continued to work for that company and dedicate his life to that until his death in the early 1930s, I think 1931. He died quite young at age about 57, but he dedicated the rest of his life to the development of the surgical appliances, artificial limbs and apparatus to help usually the vast amount of wounded soldiers and sailors and airmen that were returning from the front lines.